Bryan in
Hey,
Dundee, Ireland. Hey, Bryan, what's up?
I've got an Irishman.
I'm Scotland, not Ireland.
Oh, Scotland.
Sorry.
All right,
Aha.
well, that's our call screener then, putting the wrong thing there. Uncultured swines they are, getting those countries mixed up. So anyway, what's up, Bryan? How can we help you today?
Hi Dan, hi Ocean. Big fans of both of you, by the way. So sorry
great.
to kiss
sweet.
us, but there we go.
Great to see that there's fans all around the world watching this show. Really cool to see.
Every episode from the start, by the way. Dan.
Heck yes! Oh, I love it. All right.
So yeah, basically, I want to discuss a little thought that I had, that maybe the founding fathers got it wrong to separate church and state.
Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
So the reason that I'm saying that, because in the UK, we don't have separation of church and state. And I know that Finland as well, amongst others, they don't have separation of church and state. So because of that, religion, or the state religion, Church of England being the UK's established religion, it's kind of seen as being, a bit boring, a bit old hat. And I think that, if America had a Church of America, they may be in the same position as we are now, where just under 15% of the population still adhere to the Church of England, and now we're talking about disestablishment.
Yeah, isn't
Because-
it? Yeah.
Sorry, Dan, carry on.
Well, I was just going to say it is interesting because we are a much more religious country than you overall, and yet we have those church and state separations. And I've thought about this, and I think part of it is because I think maybe if the church becomes a part of the state, and the state is an entity that's supposed to be a public servant to all, then the church kind of adapts that in some ways as far as its general policy towards things. And I don't know, the money is tied differently as well, and how these churches get funded and stuff. You obviously don't have as many mega churches and stuff that we probably do over here in the States.
I'm not sure.
I don't.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Ocean.
Go, Ocean. What's up?
So my thought is that this, looking at a little bit of the you full screen me, you stress me out. The history of America that I'm aware of has the separation between church and state originally was meant for the federal government, but it didn't necessarily apply to state governments. And in fact, you did have in the early days of the states, each state did have a church that it would prefer. I think that if you had a uniting Church of America, it would have pissed off a lot of people really early, because whereas in Britain you have an Anglican culture, in America it was a very Protestant culture, and people were actually coming to America for religious freedoms of getting away from state churches. So even though the states in the colonies had, or in the newly independent newly independent United States had churches that were kind of preferred in each state, the freedom of being able to practice whatever you wanted was a huge value from the outset. And having a state church or having a federal church would have been a big cause of disagreement, similar to there were a number of issues that the states started settling by just saying, let the states decide it. Slavery was one of those issues. Slavery wound up resulting in a civil war later. And I think that a federal church might have caused a similar sort of strife. It's the way that America was set up with the designation of different states. There's a lot of alternate history components there that you would want to explore if you were to try and say that, well, we should have had a federal church from the beginning. And there was a lot of resistance to it, the idea of there being a federal church.
Just so I'm clear, when you say federal church, do you mean a church
like a Church of America?
Okay. So the state church would be individual states, and the federal would be all of America.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So there were kind of state denominations, sort of. There were you did have. The First Amendment, as far as freedom of religion, wasn't treated the same way that it is today at the founding of the states. You did have like there are laws that are still in the books in some states that an atheist can't hold elected office in some cases.
Yes.
So
Texas is one of those states as well.
right, and that was considered enforceable at the time. And there were also regulations in some states on who could immigrate to those states, whether or not a Catholic or a Jewish person could immigrate. There was in Georgian history, there was a big controversy about a boat of Jewish individuals coming over, and I can't remember exactly what the result of it was, but I remember that Oglethorpe had to settle that issue. It's a good little tidbit of Georgian history in there. But like there was a lot of religion regulation at that time, and I feel like that if let's steelman it and say there was a federal church, I feel like that federal church would have been resulted in being a very evangelical kind of church, in order to get the support of the people, because there was a strong, even though the founding fathers weren't necessarily evangelicals, a lot of the population was.
Yeah.
And there's a number of like famous preachers in the early days of American history that can attest to that point.
Yeah, and I would add on to that as well that, I mean, even some denominations of Christianity are almost exclusive to America, even because those splits are happening even here. I mean, heck, Mormonism is basically an American religion as well, if you think about it. So, like,
that should be the federal church, is the Mormon church.
Right, exactly. So we're talking about a population who, at least at the time of its founding, I think was definitely more diverse in its religious, opinions than probably what we would see in Scotland or England at the time, I imagine. But yeah, so I don't know if it could even happen. Just like, just based on the fervor of what we saw in the States at the time. I don't know if I'd like, there would be advantages in this. Like if we had a church and it ended up being the same way as it would be in the UK or just in Europe in general with those kinds of state churches, I'd be cool with that. I don't know, just because of the American religious tradition, if it would end up that way. Maybe the state would be even more corrupt. But
yeah, our early history is very religious.
Yeah, for sure.
To the point where I think that if there was a church, it would wind up being something like that. And it's entirely possible that we would have had a chilled out church, and that might have affected our culture, because the combination of church and state at least in Europe, has led to the state neglecting enforcing anything regarding the state religion. But that history is very different with, say, Russia.
Yeah.
So America could have gone that route very easily.
It's true. What do you think, Bryan?
Yeah, I think that you make a good point. I think, Dan, when you said that you think that if you had a Church of America, it would be a bit more evangelical, and then Ocean, you went on to say about the early history of the church when it was a lot more puritanical. It's always, it's wishful thinking, what could have been and things like that.
I'll tell you. Yeah. So I don't know if you've seen this. Sorry, I am interrupting you. I do want to hear you. But recently on Netflix, they've released the Prayer Breakfast documentary series. I can't remember what it's called. But it's talking about how the National Prayer Breakfast, which is this informal organization within the United States, has been influencing American politics for decades. Particularly presidents like Ronald Reagan and stuff were influenced by Bill Clinton and other folks. And so, like, it's interesting because the informal ties between our state and religion are already there. There is already religious influence there, but it's just not working on official levels. It's through these kinds of informal connections and stuff like that. And that's kind of a difference in culture as well than what you'd see, in Europe and places like that.
It would also legitimize laws. Having a state church in America, I think that it would have legitimized efforts to make minority religions illegal.
Yeah.
So my faith, for example, probably wouldn't be tolerated in this country. Islam would face a similar challenge. The First Amendment, as structured and as interpreted as a separation between church and state by the Supreme Court, has been a safety net for religious liberties in this country because of kind of the overwhelming presence of evangelical Christianity throughout our history.
Yeah,
it's not something it's chilled out over the course of American history.
Yes,
I think.
For sure. But back to Bryan, I do want.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Bryan.
I would say that the Church of England is kind of seen as like a Catholic light. When you look at all the ceremony and the dress and rituals and things. It's
All the
very
costumes, half the
reminiscent
guilt.
of Catholic Church.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Well, there's some things coming out I think they've got plenty to feel guilty about, but you could look into that. But yeah, I think that, even now, I know that the ACA fights for separation of church and state, as do many other organisations. I think you should just let them have it and fight it out to see which one becomes the religion of America. Then they might all look and think, well,
listen,
if that's bullshit, mine's just bullshit.
Here's what I'll say to that, though, Bryan. The religion of America, at least the ones that are fighting for the mingling of that, they're not in my interest, because we're seeing this stuff right now happening with abortion laws almost on the brink of changing and making that illegal in places. I mean, we're seeing all kinds of, troublesome things. This the discrimination against gay people in businesses and stuff. That's unfortunately that's what it would be. I think if we didn't fight that fight. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's not something that I think it's definitely not a fight that you should give up. It's something that you've unfortunately. People on the side of separation of church and state have found themselves having to fight for it.
Yeah.
And, it is just a little bit of a kind of funny thing that I think to myself. If America had a Church of America, then it might be completely different. And you were speaking about the things that are happening in Alabama. Mm-hmm. We had something similar a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. It barely registered in the national news. Our government said, no, we'll have it this way. We don't really care about your opinions on the matter. Mm-hmm. We've heard you, we've listened to you, but your opinions don't make a big dent in what's going on in our culture. And I do, I love living in Scotland. It's a really secular place. We've got churches closing left, right, and centre. And we do have a bit of a Mormon problem, but we'll get past that pretty quickly.
A Mormon problem.
I think that Utah's Mormon problem is a little bit more advanced than Scotland's, though. Just to be
only slightly. There's a little bit of a joke going in Dundee. You're more likely to run into a Mormon than get out a seagull, and seagulls are everywhere. But yeah,
that's pretty good. There was a joke. David Olivero.
Wait till the seagulls start riding up to your door in bicycles.
I used to live in Waco, where David Olivero is from, and he had this joke where he said, "Yeah, there's more Christians than people that live in Waco." And I was like, I like that one a lot. But Bryan, I like it's a good thought experiment. What are some pro arguments for the non-separation of church and state? That's something I don't always think about. I'm glad that you brought it up. It was a good topic to call in. So thanks for doing that with us today.
Yeah, well, absolutely, man. There's only one show for that question, and that's with yourself.
That's
Dan,
right.
Yeah.
All right. You can't build
Thanks for calling in, man.
Yeah, you can't boost my ego like that. I'll get too hyped, and then I'm just it goes straight to my head. But no, thank you again for calling in, Bryan. I love that you're a fan, and you gotta look. I got these shirts now. All right, maybe you should think about ordering one from me. All right.
Do you have any mugs? Mugs yet?
It's happening. We're going to work on those. Like I said, the caps are coming next. I want to get some mugs, but we're building a little library here. Got the shirts though. So,
well, if the truth wanted caps take over the MAGA caps, then we could all be very happy.
You know what? I'll be very happy too. Thanks again, Bryan. We'll talk to you later.
Good night, man. Take care.
See ya.
Thanks.
Oh man, fun stuff. Yeah.
You should have sent me a shirt, man.
Dude, look, I just got these today. All right, slow your roll, okay? It's happening though. Look, I'm just like, one day, Ocean, you're gonna get a T-shirt with your avatar on it, and you'll feel what I'm feeling right now. It's pretty good, dude. I know it's just gonna last a day, but I don't know, it's fun. Yeah, that was a good call. I like thinking about alternate histories of America, right? What would that be like?
I love alternate history conversations. Yeah. Love them. If there's no way to really give any sort of knowledge in it, but I do think that it's alternate history conversations I find are just a wonderful game of chess, of history chess to have, just because you wind up with all these little things that could have affected one thing or another, and looking at state churches and all the different directions they've gone to, that's a really fun conversation.
Yeah, it makes you think about how we got to the place that we are. What are the results of that, and where can we go from here?